There's a main theme to the Buddhist teaching. All the pieces, they fit together, or they connect. This main theme would be the letting go, giving things up, releasing just various strands of the things that we're attached to, the things that we pick up, things we identify with. And slowly but surely we release, we give those things up. From the Course is the subtlest. If there would be a description of the Buddha called samsara, flowing together, realm of rebirth cycle we're born into, engaged, die, be born into. It's attaching, accumulating, massing, identifying, finding. And if there's a theme to the Buddhist teaching, natural law that he's pointing out, it's the opposite of that. The releasing, the unbinding, the giving up, giving away. And mostly he didn't ever force his teaching on anyone. He was just explaining the way things work. And for those who wanted to amass, bind themselves to think more and more, let them do it. Wasn't trying to stop them. But for those who wanted to come out of the aging and the death, the grief, the mourning that comes with the loss of the things that are inherently impermanent and stable, that he showed them a way. And it was just that, just releasing, just giving things up. It needs to be a little systematic for it to be able to culminate in ultimate freedom. But in one way or the other, every piece of his teaching had to do with giving something up. Normally he encouraged people to start with material things, with acts of generosity, and starting to give away, even something small, even something not necessarily valuable, but just giving the small act of giving things away. And there were two real huge benefits to acts of generosity. One is that the very act of giving, providing something for someone's welfare, itself has this beneficially karmic impacts. So the benefit in our life, in our happiness, in our pleasure, in our strength, in our mental clarity, this life and after death, he saw was huge. And so even for people who weren't necessarily ready to become monastics, strive for liberation, he still saw that the benefits were so huge and that almost everyone has the capacity. If they put their mind to it, if they see the benefits of it, they see how beneficial it is to them long term, that it's accessible to everyone. And it creates tons of benefits, primarily karmically for one's own benefit, but also for others, for the beings that are receiving. Helps everything function better, helps the resources necessary to survive get to those who are needed. And secondly, and more importantly, it starts coming out of the tendency, the intentions to amass, accumulate, guard, or to, to think of only of oneself and one's survival, one's ego, one's sensual pleasures. Whereas we saw sensual pleasures could often get very complicated, cause even conflict and strife with people. But giving didn't carry with it such danger. So on the contrary, it led to more well wishing, friendship, kindness. And it allowed people to, once they start doing it, once they start practicing generosity, even something very small, just offering food to the animals, small acts of kindness for one's family, volunteering for helping the needy. Any act of kindness doesn't really matter what. Just the intention of starting to come out of the greed, out of the hoarding, and move into the release. And the happiness, the pleasure, well-being that come from giving. Normally, if one's locked into a hoarding state of mind, the idea of giving seems awful. It seems like, oh, I had that thing and then I lost it. I don't have it anymore. But when one actually gives, the more one gives, the more frequently one has that experience. So that in actuality, giving feels very good. Feels very nourishing, nurturing, feels very pleasurable, more sedated way than the pleasures of the senses, but in a more sustained way than the pleasures of the senses. So initially one might be kind of trying and fighting and protecting, guarding one's things, but the more one gives, or the more one wants to release, move away, give away, because there's the pleasure of giving. It's just feels good to be motivated by well-wishing for the recipient. But also there's a release of like, oh, now you don't have to worry about it anymore. It's like a child with a security blanket that makes that child feel safe by amassing all of these material things. It makes me feel safer. But in actuality, that security blanket for that child and those material things for adult, they don't really offer very much safety. They offer a slight bit of maybe a little bit of warmth, maybe a little bit of protection from the elements, but in actuality, there's so much in the world, our surroundings, about our body that's far beyond our control. That at the end of the day, we don't have very much control of those things. Whether a thief or a lawsuit or a government or a natural disaster destroys the things that we have, we don't have very much control. And so by giving things away, we just become that much more free because we're not holding on to that thing that isn't really within our control in the first place. And we don't have to worry, because the worry usually comes from attaching to a thing that we know isn't ours, that we know we don't have complete control over. If we had completely control over that thing, that money, that object, that house, that car, then we wouldn't have to worry. It would be ours forever. But because we know it isn't ours and we know we're going to lose it at some point, then we worry and we try to do everything to control the world to make sure that we keep that thing forever and ever. At least till we die. So by giving that thing away, we don't have to worry about it anymore. And the more we give, the more we experience that release, the more we experience the benefits of that release, the freedom that comes with it. The more naturally it comes, and the more the idea of hoarding is less and less attractive. And more one can see all the stress of hoarding, the stress of trying to maintain every material thing we get. At some point we have too much stuff. We can't leave because we're scared of losing. The more we give away, the less we have. The more we're able to pick up and go wherever we want. And in the process of giving things away, generally there's a lot of grateful people and a lot of good karma that's one's sown. And the rates of return the Buddha described are orders of magnitude more for giving things away than for just holding on to it. Even if one's giving to an animal, tends to get orders of magnitude more back than one's given. It's food or whatever. And the more moral, the more pure the person that one's offering to, the more powerful the gift. The more powerful the offering. And also the more pure one's intention, the more selflessly one gives. The more one gives with this aspiration for not just giving, but for ultimate freedom. Also, the gift is becoming more and more powerful on this at a deeper karmic level. Similarly, the more one lives a moral life, and takes great care to not harm any being, its actions, body, speech, and mind. It's giving the most precious gift to everyone around one. Gives the gift of safety, trust. As far as material things, social relationships, even more important to maintain a high moral standard than even to give. One makes sure to refrain from any action that's going to harm another being, at least knowing. Beings around you slowly come to realize that they can trust you. They don't need to fear you. They can relax and know that you're trying to act for their well-being. At the very least, trying to make sure you don't harm them. Buddha taught with respect to physical action, and make sure to not kill any being, and even so much as an ant or a lizard or a mosquito. Steal anything, not take anything that's not given from one, even a small thing. Make sure to maintain a sense of restraint around other people's property. Make sure to not have wrong sexual action. Engage in any sexuality when it's going to harm someone's relationship, someone's underage, like that. And verbally, one tries very hard, tries to be very consistent with speaking only the truth. The more one speaks the truth, the more people learn that they can trust what you're saying. They can believe it, not feel like they're going to be deceived. Can move forward with conversations and discussions, negotiations, in good faith, that you're not going to say something and that knowing that that's not true, that that's not your intention. And even more importantly, when one starts to take these types of actions, it starts to speak only the truth. Internally, one becomes clear about what's true, what's not true. Internally, one gets clear on what it feels like and what it looks like to be harmless. One starts to develop a language and an appreciation for being careful with the truth, being careful with what one's word, with what one says. Even the Buddha encouraged people to be very careful about saying, if you believe something and you say you believe it, you don't say this is true. Or if you have evidence to believe something, you say this is the evidence from which I draw my conclusion, as opposed to just saying. And so being very careful develops our own appreciation for understanding what's true and what's not true, and our ability to discern whether other people are saying what things that are true or not true. They're speaking with that same care that one puts into speech. Also, and pure speech involves not speaking maliciously, not trying to divide people, not speaking badly about people behind their back, not trying to fundamentally speak for someone else's harm. So if someone's doing something bad, you try to, people are becoming divided, you try to bring them back together as much as possible and speak for the welfare of all beings, of everyone involved, even the ones that are doing harmful things. Buddha described abstaining from malicious speech, describing someone who delights in harmony, delights in unity, who enjoys unity, who works for unity, trying always to bring people together. Other two pieces of right speech are not avoiding speaking forcefully, speaking either gently, civilly, words that people enjoy hearing or not averse to hearing, speaking in respectful ways, polite. And the last one is not speaking idly, speaking with a purpose, knowing the right time to speak, trying to choose your words carefully for the benefit of all involved. And so the more one cultivates one's action of body and speech to this level of more and more pure, the more, in addition to creating a harmonious environment around oneself, one doesn't have to experience the remorse of harming someone, knowingly harming someone. When on one occasion or several occasions the Buddha described, like, okay, what's the purpose of sila? What's the purpose of morality? And he said the purpose of morality is non-remorse. And when he described it was the purpose of non-remorse, people asked him what's the purpose of non-remorse. He described the purpose of non-remorse as this deep happiness that comes. Because if one knows one hasn't done anything bad for a long enough time, one's only doing good. Internally, one feels good, feels happy. Feels good to not have done anything. It's kind of just the absence of feeling bad leaves only neutral and good. So you don't put any seeds that create the seeds of remorse, create the fruits of remorse. And then eventually you don't have any remorse. You don't feel bad inside. You feel broken inside. You feel like there's a wedge in there, torsion, tension inside. There's nothing you're trying to avoid. There's no one you're trying to avoid. There's no one that would legitimately wish you harm. If they're wishing you harm, it's their own delusion. Because if the more clean you are internally, bodies and actions of body and speech, the more there's just no space for conflict. I mean, there's always potential, but there's no good reason. There's no sound justification for coming into conflict with someone like that. Aside from the other people's delusion, which is, it happens, but the more one dwells in that deep happiness, and deep happiness that just comes from not doing any bad things for long enough. The more it builds a sense of joy inside. And there are one more level of morality that the Buddha described, moral tensions of mind, the psyche. And when he described kind of wrong actions of mind, usually described it as either greed, fundamentally this sort of intense desire for more and hoarding and accumulating and amassing and selfishness, greed, lust, and gluttony, the whole greedy mindset, and intentions of hostility, cruelty. And lastly, adopting the belief of rejecting any moral consequences of actions. So the more one shuts out the experience of remorse itself, the more one is removing any awareness of the consequences of one's actions. So it's kind of pushing away that moral compass that we all have somewhere deep inside ourselves, and leading towards more painful results. And so if one's really given up all of that, both the actions of body and speech, as well as intentions of greed and hostility, then really one's ever more pure. The more one lives life with that basis of like a clean moral slate, the more internally one's like, it's kind of like the dross is all coming up. The impurities are all coming up just in their natural course. The fruits of our past bad actions will give fruit sooner or later. But if we're just very careful about the seeds that we're sowing and making sure those seeds are seeds of purity, that we're not sowing any seeds of bitterness and pain, suffering, and sooner or later we're going to be just consuming a more and more pure result. The state of our consciousness will be ever more clean. More than anything is, even if we never go farther than that, but the more familiar we are with that purity, the feeling of purity, the experience of purity, the experience of being internally clean, is not having any sort of slivers of pain in there, slivers of remorse, slivers of suffering, slivers of agitation, avoidance, worry, and everything. The more familiar we get with the experience of going through the world in a harmless state, a harmless mental state, emotional state, psychic state, eventually our defenses kind of come down, the more open we can be. Because the more one does damage to the world and to those around us, does immoral actions, the more one always feel like it has to be on defense, because if we've hurt others, then others can hurt us. And so we need to feel the need to protect ourselves and maintain this defense mechanisms up. Shields us from the outside, and also to some degree shields us from our own experience of ourselves. And so it blocks out much of our awareness of what's going on inside. But the more clean we are inside, the more morally pure our life, the more generosity we've practiced, the more good that we've done throughout our day, throughout our week, throughout our year, the more we can just go through the world open, internally not on defense, not trying to shut anything out. Because if internally we're pure and externally we've been only doing good, then there's no reason for anyone to want to harm us. There's nothing to fear. And then after death, the more pure we are, the more we can only gravitate towards pure states, because that's all we've put in. Like how could we move towards states of cruelty if we've never generated any cruelty? How could we move to states of fear if we've never generated anything to make anyone fear? How could we be attracted to a state of greediness if we've never generated any greediness? So the trajectory one goes on after one relinquishes the body, it's been cultivated over all of the actions done throughout one's life. And so without any compromised moral actions, one can only stay at the same level or go up. Isn't creating any seeds to go down. So it's a darker, more painful, more suffering state. And that alone is a huge, it's the biggest gift we can give to ourselves in the realm of samsara, the experience of birth and aging and death, coming together and falling apart. And another aspect of that same experience is one doesn't really need as much sensual pleasure anymore. It doesn't need to be running around chasing stimuli, whether it's some form of entertainment or some approval of other people, or some material thing. The more one's clean inside, one's happy just to sit alone, be content. A little corner of the forest or empty room, just relax. Because if you've only done good, your internal experience feels good. It's like, okay, you can go socialize if it's needed, but even if you don't socialize, you're fine just at home, sitting on the couch, meditating, being content. Fine with other people and you're fine alone. Because you feel good inside. You've only sown seeds of feeling good. So wherever you go, that's what you're living. And so the idea of kind of trying to pursue stimuli on fulfill your life with only pursuing external stimuli just sounds exhausting. Like, why would I needlessly do all that running around? It's okay, I'm just fine here. I need to be constantly pursuing sights, sounds, smells, taste, touch, people, experiences, objects, Because it's all pretty much the same. It's just stuff, and it comes together, and it sparkles, or it does whatever it does. It tastes something, and it's over. So it's just never going to be fulfilling. Once one has this internal fulfillment, it just becomes very obvious that externally nothing's going to fulfill. Nothing's going to offer that. Nothing's going to be able to, like, nothing that's only lasting for a moment is going to be able to offer a sustained happiness. No matter how many times I kick that ball, it's never going to be an enduring source of peace. No matter how many times I go to the movies, the movie is never going to offer me an enduring source of peace. No matter how many times I eat food, the food is never going to offer me an enduring source of peace. It's fine, the body needs food, so you eat food. Sometimes you sort of interact with people because there's some need and benefit to interacting, and that's good. But you don't sort of seek it out needlessly. The more you have your own peace, the more it's like, okay, I meet someone, there's some benefit, I can offer them something, they can offer me something, we can cooperate on one thing or another, like, that's great. Let's work on it together. But one stops needing it. One starts to see how much maintenance it is to try to hoard things or try to constantly, how much work it is to constantly be seeking out new stimuli, and like how little pleasure it really gives. If you don't have this internal pleasure born of morality and goodness and wholesome actions and generosity, then it makes sense. It's easy to get addicted to sensual pleasures, because if you don't know that there's an internal pleasure that's more sustained, that comes from goodness and morality, harmlessness, then if that's the only pleasure you know, it makes sense to be constantly pursuing, looking at sight, sound, smells, taste, touch, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching, looking for constantly seeking the pleasure, even if it's only a short-term pleasure. If it's only the only pleasure you know, you can't really come out of it, because without it, there's no hope. But once you have a source of morality and can recognize like how good it feels to be generous, how good it feels to be kind, how good it feels to be compassionate, then you have a better alternative and a more wise investment, thing that's serving you long term. You can build your life around that. Constantly looking for more. How can I do good? How can I be more careful with my actions? How can I be more pure? Not in an agitated way, sort of obsessively looking for new things, new ways to do good. If you want to do that, that's okay too. Still, it's much better than other things. But in a calm, just like understanding the beauty of it, understanding the pleasure of it, understanding the goodness of it, how many people benefit from it. It's like the more pure that kindness and compassion is, the more stable they are, the more detached they are from people interaction. It's a very stable happiness, a very stable pleasure. So the more one has that stability, the easier it becomes to start giving away sensual pleasures. start moving away. Whether it's giving up material things, giving up maybe a high-paying job, or giving up a lot of social engagements, giving up entertainment, self-decoration, comfort, luxury. One gets to the state of approaching being a monastic, one moves more and more towards celibacy and simplicity, and living with little, if any, monetary needs. So you just go decluttering one's life, uncomplicating one's life. The more you can go without, the less complicated your life is. So you just look at, okay, what's the base? How little can I go? Do I really need? And before you know it, your life is very, very simple. And it has lots of time, space. Because as one starts to move away from greed, you just have a lot more time, because your life costs so much less than if one's pursuing stimulation all the time. Start to cut out things like alcohol and entertainment, really beautiful food or beautiful experiences. One doesn't need to spend lots of money just for beans and rice, robes. Even before one gets to be a monastic, one can live a very simple, content life. And with all the extra time, one can start to develop more and more purity, whether it's kindness and compassion or this deeper happiness, sort of neutrality, impartial observation, just seeing things as they really are. One of the deepest benefits of that renunciation, that giving away of sense pleasures, active choice, the choice of not pursuing sense pleasure. So one's mind calms down, progressively gets more and more calm, more and more peaceful. And that deep happiness eventually turns into joy and pleasure. They're all sort of connected. It's like the more the mind and the psyche can rest, calm, relax, the more one has all this energy, it sort of naturally turns into this experience of joy. One's not spending all of one's energy agitating the mind, then that energy doesn't go away. It still kind of pools and becomes available for whatever one wants to direct one's mind towards. But it becomes more balanced and more contained. So whether one accesses that joy and pleasure, whether through kindness and compassion, or just simply abandoning the unwholesome states of greed and hostility and agitation and worry, sluggishness, depression. But the more one dwells in that peace, deep happiness, the more one develops a subtlety and an awareness that is conducive to both concentrating the psyche as well as seeing things clearly. If you feel good inside, it's easy to unify, relatively easy to concentrate on psyche. And with a concentrated psyche, one can see things clearly, can experience things clearly, can get more familiar with one's internal experiences happening. And from that piece, it becomes easier to get a bigger kind of a panoramic picture of existence and of one's own experience, to be at a clear and precise experience of what's going on. And on a macro level, one can look at just the pain inherent in human life and all life for that matter. That we're born, we age, we die, we lose beings that we love, we grieve and we mourn for it. We experience physical pain and emotional pain, mental pain. We experience all these different types of tension, not getting what we want. And one can, when one has this basis of purity, one can see those things and accept them, as opposed to get overwhelmed by them, dragged down by them. And then in the ability to see them clearly, to be able to see not only those macro types of pain and suffering inherent in having a body and having things that we like and don't like and beings that we like and don't like, but also be able to perceive our experience of the world more directly and to see these five masses, bolts, aggregates that we identify with, we take on. And so when we can start to experience not just the body, but the impermanence of the body, we remember the nature of the body to fall apart. We can experience the sensations, feelings that are arising in us, whether they're pleasure, painful, neutral, whether they're coming from external sources or internal sources. We can experience the recognitions that are arising and passing as we come in contact with different sense experience and interpret them. We recognize them as things that we associated them with in the past. And we have this sort of impulses that move us out toward the things that we like, away from the things that we don't like, towards the things that we identify with. We have this bare perception, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, mind. It's the most bare experience of it before it becomes anything. When we see all of these things flickering in and out of existence, rising, passing away, subtle burning happening all the time, And the deep happiness and the joy and the pleasure and the stillness, the balance, they all give us a framework for being able to experience those things and experience them with a sense of detachment, with a sense of understanding that they're not us, understanding that if we grab hold of them and identify with them, it's going to hurt because those things are flickering in and out of existence. So by identifying with them, it hurts holding on to them, and it hurts being forced to let go of something that's holding on to it. So bit by bit, the more that understanding penetrates, sinks in to our psyche. Intellectually, it's not so difficult to understand, but emotionally, it can be. And as that pain is loss and grief and self, losing one's concept of oneself, realization that these things, experiences that we've set our hopes on, can't really support that hope. They can't really offer an enduring sense of happiness or peace. The more one that directly perceives that impermanence and its implications, that it's not going to last. That's not me. That's not mine. It's never going to be me. It's never going to be mine. It's just a phenomenon that's arising in us. The more one starts to let go, the more that craving starts to peter out, the more it recognizes that the pursuit of those pleasurable things is actually leading to my pain. So trying to hold on to these things that are impermanent doesn't change their impermanence. It only sets me up for grief and loss. And so the more craving recognizes that, the more one's psyche recognizes that, the more it starts to peter out. It starts to become weaker and weaker because it sees it only functioned under the delusion that the pleasurable, I was going to be able to preserve that pleasurable experience. But once one realizes that there's no way I can preserve that, and especially when it realizes that there's a happiness of release, there's a pleasure of release, there's a freedom in release, the more it starts moving away from picking up the object, the sight, the sound, the smell, the taste, the touch, quality, phenomenon. It even stops identifying so deeply with the recognition of the sight, the recognition of the sound, the recognition of the smell, the recognition of the taste, the recognition of the body, the recognition of the phenomenon. And starts giving up the feeling that arises from those things, the feeling that arises from seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, time. And even the identification with the perception of those things starts to be able to release that bare perception as well. Bare perceptive, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, mind. And so bit by bit, it becomes more and more free. So just like in giving up a material thing, gets an unexpected benefit of not having to worry about that material thing. So the more one gives up, the more one finds oneself want to pick up and leave. You're not so bound to this place, to this thing, to this object. And so similarly, as one starts to relinquish all of the things that one tended to identify with, body, feeling, recognition, impulses, perceptions, that the more free one becomes, the more one isn't weighed down by any of those masses, those bolts, those things that we've been carrying around, trying to protect, preserve. And the more we don't have anything we've identified with, the more we don't have anything to fear. We don't have to fear anything because we don't have anything to lose. The happiness and peace that we've got, we've attained, doesn't depend on anything. So there's nothing anyone can take away from you that would remove that peace, that happiness, that freedom, that pleasure. Because the pleasure of release is independent. Doesn't depend on anything, so it's unshakable. It doesn't need anything. And the more familiar one gets with the benefits of release, the experience of release, the more there's no comparison. There's a sort of short-term pleasure that gives a little bit of feeling good, gets all complicated. And then there's the release that doesn't depend on anything. It's a little more subtle, but is a lot more enduring, that no one can take from you, that opens up a whole new world possibility and allows that suffering to come to an end, or allows the cycle of pain to an end. It doesn't depend on shutting out part of our experience. That arises from wisdom, that arises from knowledge, that arises from seeing the long-term consequences of where things are going. And moves out towards a complete unbinding, towards complete freedom. And so that's the whole of the Buddha's teaching. It's just giving up coarse things, giving up less coarse things, giving up moderately coarse things, giving up subtle things, giving up unwholesome mental states, giving up wholesome but coarse mental states, giving up subtler and subtler and subtler mental states. So one only has this stillness, and giving up the five masses, the five aggregates, these five bolts that we carry around and identify with, these aspects of our experience. And once we give away that baseline experience that's arising and passing away, then there's nothing left to give up anymore. Free. He's constantly moving from initially the unwholesome to the wholesome, and then from the wholesome to more and more subtle layers, stratas, dimensions, fields of reality. And then once one gives up the subtlest field of reality, one's out. It's not bound up with things that arise and pass away. One's unbound. That's what the Buddha was pointing at. One time someone asked the Buddha, what's the purpose of this? So the purpose is this other. What's the purpose of that? Okay, well, what's the purpose of that? Went down a sequence of all the different steps of the path. Got to the purpose of that is nibbana, is extinguishing, going out. And then he said, what's the purpose of nibbana? It's the purpose of extinguishing, going out. That's where the logical sequence ends. Leave it there.